Hi, this is a Mind of a Man podcast, and I'm your host, Viljami. And today I have a special guest from Chicago, USA, Barry Krost. And Barry Krost is a family constellation facilitator and a teacher or a trainer. And I have been in Barry's training since almost 2 years now. First, we started doing some mentoring, and then I started doing his workshops, and then 1.5 years ago, Barry started his own family constellation facilitator training, and I'm part of that as well. So, Barry, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be back.
So, for the people who don't know you, can you give us a short bio? Who are you? What you do?
Sure. I've been a body worker and energy healer for just about 40 years. So I started off always with some interest in healing. I also have a degree in anthropology and a degree in social history. So I've always been very interested in human behavior, human dynamics. And so I did massage and body work for a long time, and I've studied many things. And around 2003, I discovered family constellations, mostly for my own healing. I'm the child of Holocaust survivors, so I was really always sort of looking to heal that kind of cloud over me. And I started doing family constellation workshops for myself, and I just loved it. And I ended up doing a training mostly just to experience the work and with the process that's so amazing. And then at some point, I took several trainings and many trainings, and I now been facilitating since about 2010. And I do small and large groups online. I do individual sessions, and I keep growing in the work and learning more things about how to be well myself, and how to help other people be well.
Uh, so, can you tell us about your family constellation training? And maybe I will say one more thing, that if you are more interested on Barry's background and other stuff, I would highly recommend you go and listen to our first podcast, and we talk about this topic way more. And this is kind of the sequel for the first podcast. So that being said, can you talk about a little bit about the family constellation facilitator training that you started? And maybe I will mention one thing that, and I was it was the beginning of the COVID era. It's 2000 3 years ago when the COVID started. I did my own family constellation journey before that, maybe 3 4 years, and I had this feeling that I want to learn more. I want to do a training to how to be a facilitator, and there wasn't any. So I started just surfing in the web, started doing workshops online, and then I was thinking about it, that if if somebody does a training, I will join it, and if Barry does it, then I will definitely join it. And then 1 week after that, Barry releases his training for family constellations, and I didn't know Barry very well, and I didn't have no idea that he will do this training. But anyway, that's the true story. And then I joined the training straight from that. So can you tell about the origins of your training and what happened there?
Yeah, I've been training massage and body work professionals for about 30 years. So I do a lot of training over many years. And it felt to me like the family constellations, the way they were teaching it, the way I learned it, didn't have everything I think is helpful to become a confident facilitator. And then I had a student of mine. We did regular mentoring sessions, and she went and did a training with somebody who I think is pretty good, but she came back and she didn't feel like she could do it. She felt really frustrated that she'd done a whole year training and she hadn't had much practice, and she felt like she was just nervous and scared in the middle of the process. So we talked a lot about how she could have done it differently, and it made me think that maybe it was time for me to sort of figure out a way to really teach people how to be confident in if they're going to be a facilitator, like anything. So I thought about it a long time, and I really was concerned that I didn't want to do it if I was not going to do really well. And then one night I just sort of kind of came to me like a transmission from somewhere, and I wrote it down. And so the training I created, it's really meant to really teach skills, and really there's a lot more reading than usually people do. So I really feel like it's important to read and know the philosophy, to be really clear about the concepts, and have a lot of experience and practice, so that when you're actually starting to do it, you've rehearsed it, you practice it, you're comfortable with all the different ideas, and you can start to learn, because you're really not going to learn how to be a facilitator of anything until you actually do it. But you want to be ready when you start doing that. So my training's really set up to create a really confident, well knowledgeable facilitator, because it is kind of magical. The whole family constellation thing, it's very mysterious, it's very magical, but it is very skillful, and you can actually use all the mystery and the magic better if you're skilled. So that's the emphasis of my training, particularly this idea that the facilitator has to take all the information they get and then choose where to do something that changes things, that we're not relying on the mystery to take care of it, that we have to use our human agency, our will, our knowledge, our skill. And that's the place I need to offer something or change something or suggest something, and that will reorganize the family system in a better way. And it's a challenging thing to do, but you have to have good observation skills. You have to sort of be like a detective. You have to be intuitive, and you have to be very calm and relaxed. And I'm very much emphasizing the notion that we're not judging, we're not pitying, we're just observing very calmly what is in front of us, so that we know what to do. And it works, I think. I think the training's going really well. You certainly are doing really well.
Well, I can tell about my experience later. I want to first to hear a little bit about how do you see what's the importance on your own process of doing your own personal work, own constellations while you train to be a facilitator?
Yeah, I think it's my sense that everybody pretty much on the planet right now feels some level of guilt that really makes it hard for them to really be present to what's true. So what I've been noticing over time, and what Bert Hellinger writes about, is that when we're born into our family and it doesn't feel right, something feels wrong, whether it's obvious or not obvious, or something's wrong in our family system, we naturally, to survive, want to belong. And if we can't figure it out, like, how do I belong? How do I do something about what's wrong? Then we feel guilty. And so most children feel kind of guilty about whatever's wrong in the world and their family. And it's some people can grow out of that, but a lot of people are walking around with sort of this guilt. They should fix things. They should make it better. If I only made the situation better, I'd be more safe. If I could make my parents more loving. So this sort of fixing quality, it sort of gets in the way of facilitating or healing anything. So if you become a healer or a psychotherapist or a social worker, and you're still wanting to fix because you're guilty, you really are going to be less effective. So I'm trying to help people to leave all of that on the side, so that when they're working with somebody, they're not thinking about fixing, they're just present to what's going on, and hopefully they're working on their own personal guilt, so that they let go of the idea that they could have really repaired their childhood. You can't really do something about your childhood. We can make repairs in the system, but it's really, this guilt needs to be resolved. And it seems to me that's the real thing, is how do we become facilitators who are not guilty? And how do we become individuals, people who are not guilty? So then we move from being a guilty child to being an adult who doesn't feel guilt that way. They don't feel I'm responsible for my family that way. So my training really has that as at the core.
Do you agree with Carl Jung when he said that you cannot take somebody farther than you have been yourself? Do you think that's the same thing in family constellations?
Yeah, I think that if you're really blocked about certain things, I think it's hard to help somebody else, and especially this guilt thing. Family constellations do not work very well if you're trying to be a hero. You're trying to save somebody's life. It just doesn't work that way. You really have to be in a different place. And so I think a lot of people are struggling with this desire to use healing as a way to feeling less guilty about their childhood, and that just doesn't work very well. You can kind of be helpful, so it's not helpful at all, but it's limited. There's something more you can do when you can put aside the guilt, and really, then you really are open. The guilt gets in the way of really experiencing the whole universe, because you really can't really see reality if you feel guilty and you're always facing the problems. When you can really put that aside, the whole universe kind of opens up a lot more. And so, yeah, I think that all the possibilities that are there are much more available if you're not guilty.
But what do you think about this? Like, when we have this method of family constellation, which is extremely powerful, and it has this magical, let's say, quality in it, and that something just happens and we don't know why. So can you use that method without healing yourself first? Meaning that is the method so good that you can, if you apply those basic dynamics and basic rules without doing your own work, can it still work, or does it lose its effectivity?
I think you can, if you have to be at least in process. I don't know whether you need to have cleared everything out, but you have to be clearing. You have to have the sense that I can clear. I'd say you at least have to reach a place in your healing where you can put things aside. So even if I haven't resolved certain things, at least I can put them aside while I'm working. That I would say you can't do any healing method if you can't put aside your issues, at least while you're working. And maybe you're still working on them. So you have to get to that place where you can put things aside. That's that initial thing. So a lot of us have to struggle to a place where I just temporarily can put aside my issues. That I think is for any kind of healing thing. You have to be able to put it aside. And hopefully you reach a point where there isn't any issues to put aside, that it's healed. But as long as you can put it somewhere while you're working for an hour or two, I think you can really be present to somebody and be helpful.
Well, I can maybe share something now about my journey in this training. And of course, I've been doing at the same time I'm doing the training, and we have doing a personal work mentoring at the same time. So I have those both in my life for not around 2 years, I would say. And for me, it started same way that you started it. So it's for me personal healing. I didn't have any kind of urge to be a facilitator, and I don't still have this urge. It's kind of like I can do it, and it's part of my toolbox, let's say, but it's not like I don't have this like pressure that I want to be a huge family constellation facilitator. And who knows what happens in the future, but what I would like to share, that the journey has been extremely healing for me personally. And what I'm now sensing, that I'm thinking about where I was 2 to 3 years ago, my mind is so much more clear, which is like the most beautiful thing, that there's not so much confusion and this like because when you go into this healing world, new age world, spirituality, there's shit ton of everything there, and there are some gems there, of course, but I would say there's 90% is just like useless, like chit chat. And I think what this training did for me and has done, I'm still doing the training. So I dislike this. In Finnish, it's sana. The word is epäolennainen, which is like uh, unrelevant. The unrelevant things, they have been fading away from my mind, which has been so useful in all of my life. I'm a body worker, yoga teacher. I do my podcast. I do other stuff as well. I work with men, and it helps me that I'm not focusing on 75 different things at the same time. So it's like narrowed to 5 things, let's say, which is so useful when we are looking at. You can look at the dynamics of the situation. I have learned to do the look at systematically. Like there is the system is there always. It's never individual. Even if I have a bodywork client, which is one-on-one, I'm still thinking about the systemic origins of the pain, inside the body or inside the family or the bigger system. And and also the one foundation point in the training is the phenomenon, learning how to be in this phenomenological stance, kind of this Zen Buddhistic or whatever meditative stance, holding your middle line without being too much affected on the situation, just looking. So it's so helpful. And so I'm also, of course, I understand that I have my biases. Barry is my teacher. I'm saying this all good things, but it's a fact. I'm not lying here. These are things that I have experienced, and it has been really helpful. So that's a amazing thing that you have here, and that's why I also wanted to ask you to come to Finland to do a training here. But yeah, just wanted to open that up there. So I'm really grateful for that I met you and I'm then doing this training. So it's really good for me personally.
I know for myself, when I was a younger person, I was very anxious. I suffered from panic attacks. I had a lot of depression. I felt very weighted down by my family history. It was really a painful experience for me. I suffered in the world quite a bit, and I worried about everything. And family constellations has really, not only have I made some repairs to my system, but I'm a much calmer, more at ease person. I'm less panicked. Even when I'm not working, I'm just a much more at ease. I'm very aware of when something shows up that's my family system and it's not really me, and I can sort of put that aside or deal with it. So it's made I'm enjoying life so much more than I did earlier, and I feel just so much more at ease in myself, in my being, and the sort of dark cloud is gone. And I'm still working on things, but I could never imagine being this centered and calm as I have gotten. And I've trained a lot of things too. Family constellations has been a real gift, and I don't feel like I have to do it either. So I don't have to do it. I find it really enjoyable to be part of the process. It's interesting, it's challenging. So I like to do the sessions, but I don't have to do them. I don't have to be a facilitator. I like being a facilitator. I like being able to help people, one adult helping another adult, but I'm not a hero. I don't have to do this to make up for what happened in my family or to prove anything. I do it because I like doing it. I think I'm good at it. And it's always surprising, interesting every time. It's never the same.
So could we talk about a little bit about we talked about this topic in the last podcast, but I want to bring it up again because it's so pivotal, I think, that the fundamentals in the philosophy of family constellation. And I want to maybe open up this topic a little bit, like, because of when you go firstly into doing to family constellation workshop, it looks like magic, and it looks like something extraterrestrial, out of this world. And I remember when I did a one family constellation and I asked feedback from this guy, and he said something like that I was on orchestra. Who's the guy who's, what's the name of
the conductor?
Conductor, yes. And I was just waving my hand, and something was happening, and somebody was crying, and it was one of the easiest constellations I ever did. It was so easy. The topic was so like kind of this rule number one: you follow this and this, and it didn't. I didn't have to use any of kind of my special skills there. So it went like really well, no problems at all. And the guy was like mind blown, and wow, how are you this huge, amazing facilitator? And it was like my fifth constellation that I ever did in my life. But it looks, when you go to this world, it looks so strange and wild, but it has a really clear structures and these fundamental building blocks in there. So could you talk about a little bit about them? Because I think lots of the family constellation trainings and stuff I have seen and watched, they are missing these fundamental building blocks. There's some of them, but then there's like lots of weird stuff which are not for me personally family constellation. There are something add-ons or taking pieces here and there and other modalities and stuff. So can you talk about a little bit about why are you grounding your training into this basic stuff, or this like how do you see these fundamental building blocks of family constellation?
Sure. A good question. So the basis, the whole thing is Rupert Sheldrake, the British scientist, has been written and talked a lot about the fact that all species have a field that connects them. And like we watch birds and other animals, they seem to be connected like a fish in the sea. And you can't explain the way that they're interacting by just visual or sense or something that connects them on some deep level. So it's almost like a telekinetic kind of, we feel each other's thoughts. So he calls it the morphogenic field, or he calls it morphic resonance. So he says every species has this, and he has lots of good examples of it, and it's very scientific. So what we see is that every family system has this sort of field, and of course all human beings are connected by a field. But each family has a field, and that field sort of has memory. It connects us back to our ancestors. So that's the way it's sort of like an internet of the family. So we can connect all this information. So that's like the fundamental thing. We often in the family constellations call it the knowing field. There's this information we can know, but the knowing field, it's just a field of energy. It doesn't have an intention. It doesn't have any will. It's just information. So we have to actually do something with the information. And I find that there's some folks that just think that somehow that knowing field will magically come through and do it for us. And what I do is in my work and in my training is I think that we're supposed to take all that information, we can, and then discern like what's important, what's not important, what's broken. Bert Hellinger was wise in his years of looking at this stuff, and he came up with these natural laws of the family. He saw over many constellations, he saw there's these natural laws that seem to show that when a system is broken, why is it broken? He called them the orders of love. And like the first one is parents give and children take. That means we can't be bigger than our parents. We can't give to them. It's a one-way relationship. So lots of us are trying to be bigger than our parents or parent our parents, and it just doesn't work. Or the big one that we often see is if anybody in a family system is excluded, is not part of that morphic field, the field is not working correctly. So that wholeness of the morphic field is damaged if somebody steps out or either excludes themselves or they're pushed out. The field is like it's broken. So we almost always find in a family constellation process, somebody needs to be brought back in. And when they're brought back in, that field feels different. It operates differently. It's like more whole, more repaired. Everything serves, the energy flows, and a certain kind of love flows with it. And to discern what's happening there, Hellinger suggests we use a phenomenological stance. It's this very calm, like you mentioned, Zen, very calm, but we're not objective. We're definitely in the middle of it. We're subjective. So we're there in the middle of it, experiencing it. It reminds me of an anthropologist going to some culture and being part of the group as much as one can be for a while and learning about them in a personal way and then writing something objective later. So we're in the field with our clients and we sort of feel what's there and we discern what is broken and what can be repaired. And we can use some of the knowledge that Bert Hellinger left behind and others have written about. But in the moment, we can take all that information and somehow we'll know intuitively what we can have someone say or do, or a movement that brings that one back, that allows the person to be smaller than their parents, and the system flows better and we feel differently. That guilt I mentioned goes away. The weight that's been there, the suffering, a lot of that disappears because the system is repaired and we don't have to be part of something broken. Now we're part of something that is flowing really well. So we have to be this phenomenological to observe this knowing field or this morphic field. And we have to discern. It doesn't discern for us. It doesn't do that as far as I can see. So we have to be really good at looking at it, standing in it, picking up what's there, not judging it, not pitying it, really being really present in a very skillful way. And then we almost always know what to do. And then it certainly is mysterious, but when you're in the middle of it, it's not mysterious. It feels truthful, and you almost can feel like, that's what's broken, and that's what's needed. And you have someone say something like, "You are the big one, and I'm the little one," to a parent, and all of a sudden, everybody involved in the process just breathes and goes, "Oh, that needed to be said." And then we use representatives. That was the thing that Bert Hellinger started. He borrowed from Virginia Satir's work, as he sets up volunteers to represent the different family dynamics. So we set people up into this field the way they are, and then we can see from how the people are in that field what's really wrong. And then if we move someone around, or we bring somebody who's representing the outcast in, the representatives help us to stand in and repair it very easily. We call that representative perception. People can really feel everybody who's in the system in a certain way. So I can set somebody up to be their grandpa in the system, and they'll feel it, either as movements or suffering. So it's so interesting. We just have to be able to step into this morphic field, this knowing field, and be very calm and very observant and feel. And usually we can figure out what is broken and what needs to be repaired. And I think our clients usually come to us and they're not calm at all. They have their stories, they have their upsets, they have their suffering. And just the fact that they're with some people who are calmly looking at their problem with them, standing with them, so they're not alone with the problem. We're there with them. We're walking with them into their system. We're going to walk into their system and look at it with them calmly, with this sort of Zen-like experience. And so we sort of lend them some of our calm Zen lookingness, and they can really see differently that the story isn't what they think. What's going on is really what it thinks. It's really this. And if they can really see that, they can let something go or let something in. But something changes just from being sort of calmly in the presence of that field, observing what is, acknowledging what is, and just really seeing where the rules of the system are broken, and then doing something that repairs the system. We always want to repair the system. And then you're standing in a system that feels good. And now you're like all those, the fish that move together nicely, or the birds that move together. And so you're doing that too, even though you're walking around your own life. In terms of the family, you're flowing with it, as opposed to fighting with it, or being chaotic in it, or just feeling horrible in it. That's one way to look at it.
How do you see that about this? You said about discernment. I think what I like what's good about that in your training, that you discern quite clearly of what's important to learn and in which order. And for me, that was really helpful, kind of start to understand the dynamics of the field. And we have talked about this many times, like privately, but can you a little bit talk about this, that these orders of love, and that we have some people think about them differently than others, and some teachers teach different things. And where do you personally ground yourself? Because when I have studied with you, it makes really much sense, and I can like that these are these basic things that if I follow them, I will find something. But then when I'm looking at other teachers, there is lots of other things that they are using, and there has been like quite heated conversations in Facebook around this topic. But can you open a little bit about this topic?
Sure. First of all, I got to say that I follow Bert Hellinger a lot. He's not a god to me or a guru, but I do respect quite a bit of what he did, and I've read it. He's not easy to understand. Bert Hellinger didn't make it easy for us to know what he was talking about. He liked being a philosopher, so he makes it kind of complicated. But if you spend enough time at it, you can kind of get in there. And one of the things I really got from him is when we are using these, when we're looking at the system, we're looking for what is weak and what is strong. So if we see that there's an order, like parents are big and children are small, we can feel that the children, when they're trying to be big, are weak. And when the children become small to their parents, they're stronger. It feels, now strong is not the best word, but I don't have a better word, but they feel whole. they feel present, they feel like they have energy, they have movement, and weak feels like frozen, stuck, traumatized, the past, confused, dissociated. So when I'm looking at a system, I don't really need to follow the rules like consciously. I can just go in there and say what is creating weakness and what can create strength. So if I find something that's has weakness, I can sort of see if I can figure it out, or I can think about what Bert Hellinger and others have done, and I can make a suggestion or try something. And if I do the right thing, if I discern correctly what is the right thing to do, we almost immediately feel something is strong. It feels good. It feels whole. The client breathes. I feel, and I can feel in my body what is strong and what is weak. Also, what is true and what is not true. Sometimes when we do constellations, we have representatives, but the ancestors or the dead don't always tell the truth. There's some of them have not really quite left, and so they'll tell you things that are not true, or they're telling you things from their perspective. So you just can't, whatever's said isn't necessarily the truth. So I'm like, is this true or is this not true? Right. And usually true, it's a little bit like true is also like strong, and false is a little bit like weak. So the rules that Hellinger came up with, really, you can use strong and weak, or true or not true, to really use those rules. So there's like, number of rules. The big ones is the parents are bigger, they came first. Who's ever excluded must be brought back. The past must withdraw. Whoever is from the before has priority. So there's these basic rules. But even if you forget about the rules, all you have to do is say, what is creating weakness? What relationships are weak? What places in the system are weak? This is a weak place for me to be. This is a strong place for me. When I stand with my father, I feel strong. When I stand with my mother, I feel weak. So the best place for the client is with their father, because that's strong. Or he feels stronger with his mother, so he stands with his mother. So that's what Hellinger's doing. He's always just feeling what's strong and what's weak, what's true and what's false, what has movement and what does not have movement. And this comes from just being really present in the Zen-like way in the field. And you're just looking, or another way to do is what's like whole and what's broken, what's coherent, what's incoherent. But I think that's a pretty good way to proceed. And I think that's why I think that my trainings have been pretty good, is we're really trying to really see at the systemic level what Bert Hellinger saw as much as we can, and sort of follow him in a certain way. If I bring in shamanism, I love shamanism, but shamanism is very passive. If I see my shaman, I see someone on a regular basis. When my shaman does something for me, I don't do anything. The shaman does it for me. So I don't really learn anything. It's done. Something's repaired that I can't repair. That's nice, but I don't really have to do anything. And in family constellations, the client always has to make a choice. They have to surrender to the truth. They have to step into the truth. They have to step into strength. The client always has to do something to gain. And so the client comes away from the process learning something, evolving, growing. And so I'm not so interested in bringing in techniques where the client is passive. I want them to choose. Life on this planet is healthy when we choose well, and discernment is choosing, right? So I look at all this and we make a choice. So in a certain way, family constellations is kind of gives us a model of how to be a better person. If we sort of look at family, it's not just repairing what's broken. It's also a way, how do we live in a way where love flows well, where we work with the system, we're all part of the field. So it's actually, you can use it to understand how to really live well, not just how to repair what's been damaged. And that's probably also why I love it so much.
Can you say something about the role of a man in Hellinger's thought, and in your own view? What's the role of the man in a family constellation? Because that's a question. Also, got kind of there has been like heated debates on the online about the topic. So can you share your thoughts?
Also, this is a man podcast.
Yep, this is Mind of Man podcast, so I can ask it.
All right. So yeah, Helen, I always was really aware that there's something about the male energy that was really helpful. And at some point I started bringing in ancient ancestors who were men, like really strong ancestral man energy. And when I would bring it in, it was really helpful. And then I went back and reviewed a lot of early Bert Hellinger, and I would see that a lot of times he found that the client was stronger, had more strength with the father and not the mother, not the way we. So I started watching how often he would give the client the support to stand with the stronger parent, and often it was the father, and often it was clear that the father's energy was missing. And in family constellations, what we tend to see is the father's energy is protection. The father keeps the family safe. And at the systemic level, that's the father's main role, is to keep the family safe. And often what I find myself hearing and knowing is that the father must be willing to die to protect his partner and his children. And that gives the man a purpose that is his purpose biologically and in a systemic level. So the man feels strong, he feels in his purpose. Of course, he doesn't want to die, but that is the meaning of his life, is I must be willing to die for my family. And when I bring in a father or a husband who's willing to die for the family, who's willing to step into that energy, he is so strong and whole and fits into the system the right way that everybody feels relaxed. Like if I bring in that kind of energy in a group, let's say I have 50 people, and I bring in the father and I have the father step into strength, everybody relaxes. Particularly women. Women really relaxed in the presence of a strong man, not a boy. We tend to look at the world and complain about men, and there's some really good legitimate reasons to complain, but those are boys. The world is made up of boy energy, not man energy. Man energy is not aggressive the same way or deliberately violent. This man energy is very calm and strong and willing to die for the family to protect it. So that's a missing energy, it seems like, in almost everywhere, is this willingness. And I work with a lot of systems where the men don't know how to do this. I have to go back and help the ones who have died to remember what it's like to be a man, or the ancestors. And then the client's able to stand with their strong father or grandfather or the men. It makes a big difference. It allows the host system sometimes is missing that male energy. And while we may want to push away the negative qualities of men, that's not what these people bring. These men bring strength, not weakness. And what we see with the hierarchy and violence and aggression, that's weak. Real strength is different. So the man energy is so important. Fathers, almost every constellation now, I'm always looking to see if there's a missing father and if that's going to make a difference. And majority of my sessions, bringing the father in as a man, it makes a tremendous difference. And then it often, if it's not the answer to all the problems, it helps the client be resourced enough to look at the deeper issues. But a lot of the whole world, we talk a lot about trauma. I think in a lot of ways, all this talk about trauma is really missing man energy.
Yeah, and also that's one of the reasons I do my podcast and I do work with men, because I can see and sense this, that most men are lost because of the ancestral connections are lost, and the society is definitely not helping men to grow in strength. And it's more like it's good to be a weak man and not to stand up. But the reality is that the family needs somebody to stand up, be the protective, strong, capable of violence if needed, and owning this kind of masculine energy. And even when I talk about this, like, I love the fact that I am a man, that I have strength in my veins, and it's so good. And and of course I understand why other people are afraid of that, because it has the shadow side that if you use the strength wrongly, but it's not the reason to not to be strong, if you are afraid of it. And of course there's lots of healing to be done in that area in the world right now. But one thing I love that you also say that it's not like you don't have to be a man to own this energy. It can be a female energy as well. It's like male energy, the protective energy needs to be there. And sometimes it's a mom, but it's usually, like, mostly it's a man, but it's still an energy, so you can discern being a male and having a masculine role. So you can, but it's not always tied to the biology of your body.
Yeah, I mean, the systemic level is not how we are in the world. So the system has its own kind of ways it is. How that manifests in the world can be, and even Hellinger, a lot of people think Hellinger just thinks it's just hierarchy and it's paternalistic, and it's not actually what he says. You can have all kinds of different arrangements, but someone has to take that role for the system to feel safe. There has to be that energy. Somebody has to stand there and be willing to die for everybody and protect them, and that energy has to be there. And biologically, it's been mostly men. It doesn't have to be, but that energy can't be left behind. We can't live without that energy.
And there's one big question that I have asked many females in my podcast, like this, females who do women's work and work with women healing. And I have asked them that what does a healthy masculine man look like, and what do they feel? And basically the answer is always like, you are there, strong, present, holding the space, which I love the answer. But the one thing is that's problem there, that's a passive man who is just there. So one big question is, how does a healthy active man look like? Do you have an answer to that? Because we can hold the space, which is like always, we can stand there with our spear or with our axe or whatever to kind of like looking at the family and like, let's say, energetically or kind of like consciously be there to protect, being present, but it's still a passive. So how do you see what's an healthy active masculine? How does it look like?
Well, ideally, we should be hunting animals. That would be like the biological. That's how it developed. We should be out there hunting some gazelles or something. But I think it's just this assertive energy. So it's not passive. It's pretty calm though. So that's what the difference is there's a difference between being passive and calm. So I think it's just a way it's sort of the male energy in the world is very active. It's very like, you do things, you get things done. You're very direct, very forceful in a certain way. So there's lots of ways it could be manifested, but it's not passive. It's not waiting for something to happen. It's a lot of times it's leading.
Well, what definitely, like I was thinking about you, and what are you doing? You are creating something. You wanted to create and training. So you went and you did it. And then you are active in the social media. You are advertising your training. You want to do it. You perfect it. You constantly learn more. It has this assertive, active energy there that you want to do it because you think it's good. And I like that, because you are definitely doing it like constantly, like grinding your way forward. So it has this positive, active, assertive, going somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's it. A man, the male energy has to have going somewhere, has to be active, and has to have a real sense of man agency, willpower, agency. It's a certain kind of male energy that's very, very clearly not female energy. And there isn't a lot of opportunity in the world to express it and to be it. But that doesn't have to limit it. I just find a way to do it. So I'm finding a way to stand in it. It's more that I stand in it. And even if you're around me, you will realize I'm not passive, but I'm also not aggressive. So it's just the way I hold myself, the way I stand, the way I am, is with the energy of men. And my wife likes that a lot. She feels safe, and she also doesn't get in the way of it. I'm like doing something. I'm doing something. It could be, I imagine, sculpting, or Michelangelo chipping the marble out of that thing. There's probably lots of ways men could find a way to manifest this active energy, and women who have this energy also can manifest it, but it's definitely not passive.
So I have to mention Jung always when we talk.
Yes,
I cannot help myself, so I will do it only once. But
no, this will be the second time.
Oh, this is second, and of course it is. So people who know me, that I'm obsessed with Jung. I'm always reading Jung. It's like I love Hellinger, but my first love is Jung, and I cannot like. It's he comes first in my life and in my psyche. So I'm always comparing these two things, and there's lots of like similarity, but also difference. So Jung talks about this, that you come from your mom as a man. You come from your mom, and the kind of the movement is in your life when you individuate. You have to first stand with your father, and
Mhm.
then you go from there. And
Yeah.
with women, it's different. You come from your mom, you go stand with your father, but you have to go back to your mom eventually, because you have to stand in the line of women because your mom is a woman and you are. So do you see this happening in family constellations as well, this
Yeah,
move?
I think Hellinger would agree exactly with that, and I do see that. But then there's no the rule. The rule really would be what gives strength. So if it's different, if it ends up being different than that, that's fine. But I would say, as a generalization, that is true. But both children have to be able to be in both parents' sphere. And Hellinger would say that the mother is more the experience that you have growing and nurturing yourself, and the father has a lot more to do with taking you and supporting you in the world. So the father is much more about you and the world, and your mother's more about you and the inner world of your childhood or your inner self. So it's slightly different, but Hellinger would say your father really helps you go into the world. And at that time when you're really exploring the world, you need your father's safety. Someone has to be keeping an eye on you, making sure that you're taking those first steps. And at some point, maybe the parents are more equal once you've actually individuated and left. But so the first, I think Hellinger says like 0 to 7 is more mom, and 7 to individuation is more dad. I think that would be sort of how he would divide it.
And what about this notion that Jung talks about, that we have two sets of parents? And of course, I understand now we are going this area where Jung has a language of his own and Hellinger has its own, and they are not always talking to each other. But I'm trying to just hash it out, this idea, and let me know what you think. It doesn't make any sense. So Jung has this idea that you have two sets of parents, and number one set is your real parents, where you come from, but then you have to individuate and leave your parents and find kind of the divine parents, in sense of what's your relation with the God, the Father, kind of this male energy, this higher energy, and what's your relationship with this higher feminine energy. Do you see this kind of movements or idea in family constellations? It's kind of
I,
like
I
goes
don't think
away
so.
from the. Yeah, okay.
So here's the difference between Jung and Hellinger and lots of people. Hellinger is focused on the systemic level. And I think a lot of what Jung was talking about is the personal level, which is different. At the systemic level, I don't think there's any ideal anything else. There's the parents you have in the system. Now, once you individuate, what you do personally in terms of sacred forces and other things, that may be more, you might be more correct there. But Hellinger, I think for me, it stops at the edge of the systemic. And now I don't think family constellations is useful when we're talking about the personal. That might be where Jung is more helpful.
Yeah, and that's my experience as well. It's kind of like family constellation has this horizontal element more, and Jung has this vertical element. And you need the both of them, of course. They are not like um, that. You need both of them. And what's good for me personally, that when I do family constellation work, it definitely helps my personal individuation, but it kind of doesn't give me the kind of tools to where should I go and what should I do in my life. And of course, Hellinger says that you should have a spiritual practice in your life. You should have a job or do something in the world, but he doesn't like address that. What's the what is that? But Jung more addressed it, how to be in the world, and when you individuate, what are the steps, and what's your relationship with God, and how do you find it, yada yada, yada,
Well,
contrasexual.
psychotherapy is really comes from, it starts with the individual and the individual's experience. And Hellinger is starting from the other end. We're starting from our experience as being part of a system. And you're always going to be influenced by that system, but that doesn't describe all of your experience. It's a main experience, but you have a personal experience that's different than the systemic experience. And I think keeping one of the things I really want to do with myself, in all my work, is discern this is systemic, This is personal. This is just biology. This is the sacred. So I like to discern the different aspects and really be clear about it, because then I think it's easy to see how they meet and what's the real area that we're trying to do. And so I don't think family constellations is as helpful when we're looking at the personal experience. And I don't think the personal experiences, any techniques around that are as helpful looking at systemic. It just doesn't work as well. So I want to be
Yeah.
at the right level of what we're doing, the right approach for the right kind of material.
Yeah, and I have to say that the genius of Hellinger is that you can look at Jungian concepts through help of family constellation, let's say tools. Just to you can constellate, you can look at the shadow and golden shadow and different aspect. And I did a training with Nir Esterman, who's like a pioneer in the field of using Jungian concept in family constellation, and it works really well, not really well, and it's work in process, but you can use it, and it's fucking amazing that this tool that Hellinger, I don't know, invented, is that the right word, but kind of gave us or discovered, you can use it in so many ways, and it's like endless possibilities almost to how you
Yeah.
can use these tools.
Yeah, and when I talk about Hellinger, I'm almost always talking about the earlier Hellinger. Later on in his career, he evolved to looking much more at a spiritual way of looking at things and really trying to turn over our all of our lives over to some higher power, because he started off as a priest. So his later work, it's really like basically trying to just let the higher power sort of direct us. So it moves from the systemic to the spiritual, sort of directing us. And I don't feel that. I mean, I don't connect with that. It has nothing to do with the systemic so much to me. So that later Hellinger work, I've read it, but it doesn't resonate with me, and I don't really experience it. So we have to be clear sometimes what we're talking about. And family constellations is earlier Hellinger, and later on, it's really not family constellations. It's just more like Heidegger's philosophy. It's more like German spirituality.
Yeah. So I will do an U-turn and do hop in the other topic that we talked about. So you are coming to Finland. That's our idea. We talked about it like a year or 2 years ago, and we set up the idea that when this whole stuff with Corona is over, we will do an intensive family constellation intensive in Finland. So and you have this idea of for what you are going to do. So can you share about what are we going to do in Finland in August this year?
Yeah, Finland's one of those parts of the world that I'm really interested in, the fact, especially since the fact that you have a history there, this long history there in that part of the world. So there's a way that the ancestors are connected to the land, and you're connected to the land. So here in the United States, it's so different. We're so disconnected. But here in the way that we experience our ancestors is influenced by the environment. So here you have in Finland, you have ancestors who are part of that environment. You're still in that environment. So theoretically, the ability for people in Finland to connect with the ancestral energy there's a lot of opportunity. And it seems to me that we're missing that connection all over the whole planet. And when we get connected to our ancestral energy, that energy helps us to balance the system. But we're meant to have a regular connection with our ancestors. There's a wisdom about life. There's a repository of experience that can be influenced by. They're meant to help us live. So when we die, we become an ancestor and help the living. And most of the world has a disconnection from that. So when we talked about coming to Finland, I read a little about more about Finland than I already knew, and I just felt like in my gut, in my soul, I just felt like there's just these opportunities to really feel this ancestral connection in especially in the forest of Finland. We should be able to find really good connections with the ancestors who are already there, and they're also connected to the spirits of the land. So I just was really curious how we would do this in Finland, really find the ancestral connections, use it to heal, also repair some things that were more connected to them. So what needs to be repaired so that we can connect to them more? And I think of it now as sort of an ecosystem, or it's like this constant rotation. The living become ancestors, and then the ancestors support the living, and that cycle seems to be so essential. And I'm seeing it more and more. And we also have the issue where there's a lot of the dead they haven't completed the journey. So we have a lot of people who are incompletely dead, and they haven't joined the ancestors. And I'm wondering if we go to Finland and we can more easily help those dead to join the ancestors. How can we have them join the ancestors by repairing whatever's keeping them here, so that natural flow happens? And we could do it in every country. I mean, but I've always been really interested in that part of the world. I did a constellation many years ago where I was connected to some of the root people of Finland in a constellation. So I have a kind of somewhere in me, I have this little experience of those ancestors. So it's a curiosity, but I just want to see, how can we connect better with the ancestors, and how do we benefit from that connection? How does that connection improve our lives, so that we aren't worrying so much about everything, so that the men know how to show up, and women have a strength from the ancestors that they can't depend upon from anybody else. So like, we all have these aspects of the ancestors we're supposed to have that we don't have. And so I thought, if we, when you invited me, it was really exciting to just sort of see how can we have this better connection with the ancestors? How can we repair it? And then what's the benefit of it? And more, I see this amazing benefit to having the ancestors in our lives for all people. We have to have the ancestors if we want to be well.
I will comment on that, but first maybe I will say that, so we are doing the 4-day intensive in Finland in Elontuli Retreat Center. So it's like it's 1 hour from Helsinki airport, so it's easy to come there, and it's middle of Finnish forest near the lake, so it's beautiful Finnish forest. We have vegetarian food, all things are covered in the fee. So if you are interested, please contact me or Barry, and I will tell you more, and I will link the event under this podcast as well. But what you said earlier, I want to share this experience, and maybe I had it like 1.5 years ago in one of your workshops. And it was in the training. It wasn't even a family constellation, but we were sharing about our relatives something. I don't remember what was the exercise, but anyway, there was this lady who was talking about her great grandfather, who was some sort of an Indian, and she was so proud of that. She has this 1/8 of her heritage has this connection to the land, and I remember she was probably weeping or telling about this, that she does feel this like connection to land through this one line of her family. And then it hit me like, I'm Finn, and I have like 9,000 years of relatives here in Finland, and I'm like white as like a chalk. And they have done like a family trees from my family, and it's like only Finns, like zero other people there. And I kind of realized that, holy fuck, that I'm not like respecting that 9,000 years of heritage that I have. Like, people talking about they are like partly Indian or partly kind of indigenous tribe. That, well, I'm a fucking indigenous Finnish man, and of course there's like lots of this societal pressure that I'm a white man in the modern society, so I cannot be proud of myself. But then it's like hit me like, oh, I have to be proud of my. There's just so much good, so much energy where I stand if I take it to myself. And of course I need to do more work around it, but it's like it hit me really hard, and that's made me like appreciate Finland even more. And I want to kind of bring this work to Finland and do more work, because I'm sad to say that even in Finland, I see family constellation facilitators not appreciating Finnish heritage and having this some sort of white guilt of being a Finnish or being a European. And it's so sad that, of course, there's like things in the world and history which are not good, but there's so much good and power to being a Finnish. Like we are in this quite small tribe, 5 million people living here between Sweden and Russia, like living our own life and having this beautiful land that we are not appreciating. So it's pity that we don't have it. And well, one part of my work is that I want try to bring that connection back and show to people that you can appreciate your roots.
Well, especially when we die, everything we did is really over. So you really can't judge us. So judging the dead is really doesn't help anybody. So good or bad, I die and I become an ancestor. Now, as your ancestor, if you ask, I will give you my blessings, my wisdom, my support, my love. And when I get that from the ancestor, if I respect the ancestors, your ancestors, thank you for your blessings. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your support. We both benefit. The ancestors are respected, which is what they want. And I get some vital energy, some vital connection within that morphic field that I can't get if I'm ignoring them. And when I allow that energy to come and I respect it, it enhances my life. It enhances that morphic field too. And so a lot of the bad things happen in the world are because we break the connection between the ancestors and us. It isn't like the ancestors are bad, we have to keep them away. We need to bring them in. Because if they really have died, they've left behind any, whatever they did in life that was whatever it was, good or bad, it's gone. They're just ancestors now. They're not still doing that. So we don't want to judge them. We just want to let the wisdom and the benefits of the ancestors enhance our lives. And that's why the world's broken. We've lost our ancestors. And then we judge them or we keep them away. And that makes it worse. They're waiting for us to respect them. And then there's such a benefit when we do a constellation and we set up the ancestors and people really tune into them. It's like this thing we were talking earlier about having the male energy relaxes everybody. Everybody responds so well to this energy of the ancestors. It feels so loving. It's like having the best grandparent, a grandfather, or great grand. Everybody has these grandparents or uncles and aunts that are just so supportive. We have all these ancestors waiting to give us that, and it's at a soul deep level. And I think when we have that energy, we're more at ease with everything. So as crazy as the world is, the world would feel less crazy if the ancestors were respected and invited into our lives. That's what Hellinger really found, was how to reconnect us with this ancestral energy. He certainly witnessed this when he was with the Zulus. This isn't Zulu work, but he saw that when people are connected to their ancestors, something beautiful happens in our lives. And we see this in family constellations all the time. My work is moving more towards really trying to articulate that rather than we've got to fix trauma, we've got to fix problems. That's symptomatic. The real fundamental solution is we must be connected to our ancestors if we want to grow and be well. And it's waiting for us. And so doing that in Finland sounds exciting. I'd like to do it everywhere, but I'm totally ready to do that in Finland. And I hope some people from other countries will come too. But I think it'd be great. I've been reading a lot about Finnish mythology and everything, and I just everything in me says, "Oh man, let's just see what would show up in what does that Finnish morphic field feel like?" I'd like to get deeper into that feeling of the Finnish aspect going back thousands of years. So I selfishly just want to experience it. I just think it'd be really cool.
Okay, so let's go for our last topic before we end this podcast. And I talked about this before we started the podcast, and I think it ties up to this, like what you said, that we are too much thinking about the trauma, which I agree 100% that it kind of trauma has become is now this kind of this huge thing that we all have to kind of bow down into, that there's a trauma somewhere. Oh my God, be sensitive, and it's the number one thing in the world. And of course, understand family constellation comes from that it's a healing modality. It's Bert Hellinger was a psychotherapist, and it was a family constellation therapy in that sense. But what I have been thinking about is the other side of therapy. So, like we in the family constellation, let's say you have to fix something, that you have an anxiety about something and you do a family constellation, and during the constellation you can see that there's this fractal movement that your grandfather did something in the world world in the war, and that's why your mom is anxious about it and carrying some guilt, and that's why you are anxious about it. And when you fix this kind of dysfunctional uh, dysfunctional dynamic, you are able to feel less anxious, which is like quite straightforward. And but this is a negative way of looking at your past. What's not working, and then you are fixing that. But could
Right.
we look at family constellation differently? That, like I was telling you, that my grandfather, from my mom's side, he was an inventor. He was inventing all the stuff, and he was doing lots of weird stuff in his life. And I was thinking, can I take it the other way around and do a family constellation that I want to connect more into the energy of my grandfather, who was an inventor, kind of like these positive constellations. So, can you
Sure.
talk about this idea a bit?
Yeah. Years ago, I was working with there's a facilitator here in the United States called Ed Lynch, and he had this exercise. You would set up 4 people who were like very important in your lives, who weren't family members, like people, your teachers and professors and people you met along the way in your life, and we would have people represent them, and you got to meet them again. A lot of times they're dead, and revisit how they helped you. So certainly you can set up constellations to feel the healthiness in the system, to connect with our healthy ancestors, and to so that's a little bit more, rather than repairing it. It's, you can set up constellations that reaffirm the natural order of things, and the natural order is the ancestors came first, and we respect them, and I bow to them in a certain way, and then I get this energy. Or you could ask them for wisdom, and you can share things. So certainly it's built into a family constellation, just like it's built into every ritual process that we do socially, to find a way to constantly stay connected to the ancestors. Family constellations is doing a lot of repair because we so are damaged. But let's say we all got a lot healthier. We could use family constellations as a regular ritual type process as well, not just for healing, but for maintaining this relationship. And if something happened in that relationship, we could repair it right away. So something happens and somehow I'm disconnected with this ancestor or that ancestor, I can use a constellation to repair that situation somehow. Or something's going wrong and I'm not able to access the ancestors, I could use a constellation to find a way to access that information, maybe in a different way. So really, family constellations ultimately is about how do we have a good relationship with our ancestors. And when that relationship is not well, we've got illness and trauma. And when that relationship is good, we would certainly see a world that had less trauma. Certainly, indigenous people had stuff happen all the time, but they weren't necessarily traumatized. They might die, but it doesn't mean that they spent days worrying about it. So I don't think that they experienced this trauma that we experience. I think that's a situation where we're so disconnected from our ancestors that when something goes wrong, we collapse very easily because we're so lacking support that almost anything can knock us over. Certainly a earthquake or a war is going to be devastating, but if we had a connection to the ancestors, I don't know that it's as devastating, and I also don't know that we'd have war.
So, could you say that kind of the opposite to trauma is kind of this healthy and strength relationship? Has a healthy and I don't know, how do you call it, but I mean that if there's systemic trauma, there's systemic traumas, and something is dysfunctional. So the opposite for that would be a healthy relationship with the past and receiving the blessings.
Well, I would use the word
Fully.
I would use the word reciprocity in English.
Okay.
Reciprocity. So it's or Hellinger talks about give and take. I give respect, I take their love and their things. So it's just a give and take, a mutual exchange. Reciprocity is like, I like this word, but just mutual exchange. We're meant to have a mutual exchange, and this strengthens us. This mutual support strengthens us to deal with the world as it is now. And when we don't have that, we're empty. It's like our glass is empty because we're constantly wanting to fill it with something, and we can't fill it because it's the ancestors are the ones that can fill it for us. So we all have a great emptiness. And so when something happens, we have such little reserve that we collapse very easily, and we call it trauma. And I think if we had a better connection with the ancestors, we'd be more resilient because we have this reciprocity, we have this mutual exchange with them where they're constantly giving us something that makes it easier for us to live. We live better with that connection with them, and we're missing it.
So what do you think about, if I'm pushing a little bit about this topic, that like we have it's like really clear that we can inherit trauma. That's like really, really clear.
Yeah.
You can see it like every day. If there's a trauma a couple generations ago, you do family constellation and you will see that it affects on you.
Mm-hmm.
And but could you kind of tap into positive qualities of your relatives using family constellation, like kind of like using it consciously? Like if I said let's say my grandfather was some sort of inventor, or somebody else, that I could kind of cherry pick those good qualities in somebody.
Yeah,
Would you do that?
You could set somebody up to be your great grandfather, and then see if there's anything in the way of, making sure we could use the constellation process to make sure that you have a very healthy connection with him, so that's ongoing. We clear anything out of the way so you can constantly receive the wisdom of that one. And then, and of course, then if that becomes part of you, then you pass that on genetically to your descendants. Yeah. We can pass along trauma to our descendants, but we also can pass along the goodness and our healthy responses to life also get passed on. But you could certainly use constellations to ensure that there is a healthy relationship with those ancestors that you want and need in your life. And why aren't you getting that now? So we want to look like, why aren't you getting that ancestor, that invention energy? Why isn't that the inventor not talking to you now? What's in the way now? Let's clear that out so you can have that regular interaction with them. That's certainly something that's built into the constellation process.
Yeah. So, and I love that kind of like, that's the point, is like repairing all the stuff you can, so you can pass down the healthy way of being a human being. Yes. And so you can give that and give the blessing to next generations. So you can have that, keep it, and do whatever you can with it.
Yeah, I would say that's my goal with my work. My goal with my family constellations training and my work is not to just keep repairing the damage of the world. My goal would really be to help people have that connection with the ancestors so that the world is healed and the world is more natural for us, and we're more healthy. And the world certainly would have plenty of problems with still, but we've created a whole level of problems that are not necessary. It's unnecessary to have as much trauma as from each other. The natural world has enough things, disease, COVID showed us that things bad can happen. That we have to deal with, but we also spend most of our time dealing with other human beings being horrible. And that doesn't seem to me to be necessary. That seems to be the result of having broken down our connection with the ancestors that sort of made us crazy.
So I think we have a little bit work to do on that area still. So, and this was one part of that work, this podcast. So thank you, Barry. It was really nice to talk to you again. And I will see you soon in our trainings, and hopefully in Finland as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vilmi.
Thank you.